Good morning and a very warm welcome to you. I'm Samina Ali Khan and I'll be your host today, guiding you through this event. It's great to have so many of you back with us today, and it is really lovely to see new faces joining us as well for the first time. Now, our event today is Public Sector Decarbonisation, which is being delivered to you by Public Sector Executive. Now, the event's going to be packed full of opportunities to network and acquire current sector knowledge, either from the speakers or our event partners in the digital marketplace. And we would like to thank industry leaders and the experts who you'll meet today who are with us to share those valuable insights. Now, the content standard that will be shared on the PSE365 platform means that all the content is CPD certified. And that means for every hour of content that you watch live, you will earn 1 CPD point. To get your certificate, all you have to do is email the PSE team, that's at marketing@cognitivepublishing.com. That's marketing@cognitivepublishing.com, and they will sort it out. And in addition to CPD, you can give back, and you can also feel great through some friendly competition. I'll explain a little bit about that because while learning today, our gamification tools will be active. And you can score points by engaging with the platform's different elements. For example, if you join a live session like this one, there are 50 points to be gained. If you make a connection with another delegate in the platform, well, that's 100 points. And if you want to ask a question in the session or perhaps engage with one of our exhibitors in the digital marketplace, once again, you can earn points, and that is another 50 possible. So I'm sure you get the gist. All you have to do is give it a go and hopefully earn quite a lot of those points. And at the end of the event, here's the competitive bit. Those who finish in first, second and third places respectively, they'll get 250, 150 and £100 donated in their name and organisation to More Trees. Now, More Trees plants a tree for every £1 donated. So it is a great way to do some good and to be in with a chance of winning. All you have to do, as we say, is to please engage with all the great content that we have, especially today, and with the delegates that are joining us. Now, alongside the several panel discussions on the agenda for you to enjoy, there's networking opportunities that can be accessed via the speed networking function, and you can do that throughout the day. When you collaborate with your colleagues, that's a great source of education, and it's a great way to share best practice too. It also helps extend the knowledge and the connections that we have, and those can be accessed at any time, ultimately growing the community we have at PSE 365. And on that note, a reminder about the PSC platform. You and your teams can access a wealth of resources as part of our on-demand content alongside the digital marketplace. And we do value your views as well on today's event, especially. So please feel free to share your thoughts and experience across social media. And we have a hashtag. It is PSE365, hashtag PSE365, please, if you want to do that. So let's move on to the focus of today. Now, with the UK government setting one of the world's most ambitious climate change targets to become net zero by 2050, what role does the public sector play in decarbonisation? And, of course, its commitment to achieve net zero. Well, the annual public sector energy bill is estimated to be about £3.4 billion. Government targets focus the spotlight on public sector decarbonisation, and the message from COP26 in Glasgow further highlighted that need for innovative technologies to actually achieve net zero. We can look at examples of these initiatives in transportation and the current housing sector, but where does this sector actually start? Well, from zero waste strategies to sustainable power generation and the growth of low carbon hydrogen, we return to the big question. How do government bodies drive and demonstrate efficiency? Our first topic for discussion is energy efficiency in public buildings. And with 40% of the UK's CO2 emissions coming from heat and buildings, improving energy management to decarbonise the heating and cooling of buildings is critical in transforming the energy performance of public sector buildings. We'll discuss all the methods to improve the energy efficiency of existing buildings, and we'll try to determine the positive steps needed to move towards carbon net zero and indeed transform energy performance. And we've got a great panel of leaders in this field to discuss this topic, and they are Kate Doherty, who's the head of Net Zero and Sustainability for Building Services, Alex Snelling-Day, who is our Green Investments Manager, South Cambridgeshire District Council. We have Moses Jenkins, who's the Senior Technical Officer, Historic Environment Scotland. And we also have Naomi Baker, who's the Senior Policy Officer for Energy UK. So welcome all to our panel. Nice to have you with us. And we also want to include your voices as well, please. So if you do ask a question, use the Q&A function and we'll get through as many of your questions today as possible, half hour if we can. So Kate, let's start with you, please, first, if we can. A simple question, and it's also a statement, really, because should we actually be building new buildings?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. You know, we're talking so much about net zero carbon new buildings at the moment, and that's really important. But a new net zero carbon building, that's not really solving the problem. It's just not making it too much worse. We've got what's called the embodied carbon reduction hierarchy, and the first step in that hierarchy is build nothing. You know, and then it goes to build less and build clever and build efficiently. So it's a huge change of mindset for people like me and my colleagues. You know, a lot of my work is around designing net zero carbon new buildings, but this is a huge mindset for us in the built environment sector, because essentially, you know, that first question that we got to ask, it's one that could actually be doing us out of a job. That's, you know, do we really need this new building? And it is up to us as built environment professionals and to our clients to actually challenge the root cause for the need of a new building and to explore those alternatives. We've all been working from home, haven't we, for the past couple of years. So when we're looking to build a new office, do we actually need one, or do we actually need one that's as big as our brief says it should be? And then the next step, of course, is to build less, so maximize the use of the existing assets that we've got. And that's where low carbon refurbishment and low carbon retrofit come in, and that's so important. So, I mean, the question was, should we be building new buildings at all? And of course, in some cases, retrofit's not possible. Maybe we just don't have enough of something like homes. And so where that is the case, I really believe we need to start insisting on nothing less than net zero carbon new build. And that's happening, and it's really exciting. A great example is the new hospitals program. There is a commitment that all those hospitals will be net zero carbon, and we're working on some of those fantastic projects at the moment. We're also working with a small home builder at the moment who is building carbon negative homes at no additional cost. So, you know, it is absolutely possible to build net zero carbon new build. We should be doing nothing less than that, but there needs to be a massive focus on reusing and repurposing what we've already got, for sure.
Okay. Well, on that note, let's talk to Alex then, because Alex, you've already been involved in a project like this at South Cambridgeshire District Council. Tell us about that, what the drivers were, and really what the issues were, the problems when you were trying to achieve this goal. Because you did, didn't you? Tell us more.
Yeah. We're nearly at the end of it, so we're not quite finished yet. But yeah, just following on from what Kate said, I think, yeah, there was part of us that thought, well, should we just move building? Shall we just move to a nice new net zero building? And I think very quickly we realised, no, that was kind of shirking responsibility. And I think, you know, our elected members and senior staff are really keen to kind of show that leadership and show that it's possible. So carbon was the biggest driver for us in our building. So it's a 38,000 square foot, 3-storey office building within Cambourne in South Cambridgeshire. and we looked at a whole retrofit. So energy efficiency measures across lighting, across heating, cooling, and also adding things such as electric vehicle charging points as well. So for us, it was that 2050 net zero target. This project gets us between 80 to 90% of the way. So there's still a little bit left to do to get to that 2050 target. But this project on its own will help us get there. So the main part of the project is a ground source heat pump, which takes us away from our as much as we can away from our gas boiler usage across that electrification. We've also got a solar carport within the car park, LED lighting, again chiller efficiencies, and we've got 20 electric vehicle charge points we put in. I think we started off with 4, and we realised very quickly that actually we needed to have quite a substantial amount more within our car park as well. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's our project. £2 million project, just shy of 2 million, and yeah, 2 years in the making, and perhaps yeah, just under a year to deliver as well. So
Okay, and you came across the main sort of barriers?
yeah, I think the timing of our project was both helpful and also a hindrance. So we'd really worried about the impact on people within the building, using that building. And obviously COVID hit, so there was a lot of people working from home overnight. So in terms of that impact on people doing their job at desks in the office, it just didn't really manifest. So that was really great. But on the other hand, we had steel price increases, we had difficulties with supply chain and access to contractors. So on the one hand, that's why there's been a bit of a delay to the project as well. So for us as well, the main thing that I would say is that, you know, carbon was the biggest driver. So that's why the ground source heat pump was a really key for us to move across from gas to electric kind of energy. However, we had kind of fabric issues with the building and condition issues with glazing and things like that, which also we needed to look at, but didn't necessarily give us the kind of carbon saving side of things as well. So yeah, understanding the condition of your building before you look at a generation kind of project as well is really important.
Okay, Alex, thank you for that. It's a nice point to move to Moses, actually, because Moses, we're talking obviously about retrofitting and maintaining buildings and obviously preserving them. I was just wondering how public buildings that are of traditional construction or heritage significance be made energy efficient without adversely affecting their performance. What's your experience of that?
Yeah, I mean it's very heartening to hear the first 2 speakers talking about retaining buildings and retrofitting them and understanding their condition. When I first started looking at this quite a long time ago now, that was very much a narrative we wanted to try and encourage, and it's great to see it enter the mainstream. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good now, having heard that. We've done a lot of work in terms of methods and materials for retrofit of traditional buildings. So what materials do we stick on the wall or put in the roof space or put under the floor to make our traditional buildings more thermally efficient? But crucially, how do we do this in a way which works with moisture movement, works with ventilation, improves the overall condition of the building as well as its thermal performance? So without wanting to go into all the minutiae of the materials that we've looked at, I guess the sort of headline I'd like to put across is that there's lots of methods and materials out there. If we take the time to fully understand how the buildings that we're working with perform to begin with, we can make substantial thermal improvements and keep these buildings, whether they be of particular heritage significance or whether they're just sort of bog standard traditional buildings, we can keep them functioning, we can improve their performance, and we can retain them for another 100 years, 200 years, you know, long into the future. So there's lots that we can do. We just need to take care to understand how these buildings perform first.
You've mentioned that several times about understanding how these buildings perform first. Do you think there's enough skilled and qualified workers who can actually carry out these retrofit processes in that sympathetic and considered way in order to meet the targets that we need?
I think we need a considerable investment in skills, both in terms of installers, so the people that actually stick stuff onto walls or under floors or into roofs, and also amongst designers, so the people who are designing and specifying the work. So we need to raise knowledge and skills of traditional buildings, how they perform, and how retrofit impacts on the performance of these buildings. So if we make one bit of a building warmer, we've probably made another bit colder. So how does that affect condensation, moisture, ventilation, and all of that sort of considerations? So do we have enough people that understand that just now? We probably don't. But with a bit of investment and a bit of effort, then we can certainly fix that issue and ensure that the buildings are retrofitted well to perform into the future.
I like the way you said a bit of investment, because at this point I'm going to bring in Naomi, and I've got a question for you, Naomi, which is quite simply, is the funding released to date sufficient to retrofit the public sector estate?
It's probably not a huge surprise. I'm going to say at this time it's not. So the government has quite ambitious targets in this area. It wants the public sector to reduce emissions from buildings by 75% by 2037. So it's not really a huge amount of time. So in terms of, it has put forward a lot of money. So it's put forward 2.4 billion, I think, so far, which has gone into a public sector decarbonisation scheme fund. Which is actually working really well. The money has been spent quickly. It's been allocated well. It's very much using existing infrastructure and existing schemes that the public sector has been working with for over a decade now. So that's working really well. There isn't enough money, and a report that came out earlier this week by the Climate Change Committee last week that highlighted that there's about a third of the money that the public sector will need to decarbonise. So there's not enough investment going into the kit, but I think also what I'd like to emphasize is maybe some of the approach is lacking. So almost all the approach so far is putting kit into buildings. That's great. That's definitely needed. We need lighting upgrades. We need thermal upgrades, all that kind of thing. But what's very important is how that building is managed on a long-term basis to ensure that the kit is used properly and that the savings. So it's really that long-term management and integrating that approach into sort of core business, which is really important. And I think that's missing from the government's approach at the moment.
So, I mean, we heard about this a couple of days ago, actually, on the news. There are questions at the moment about whether we are going to meet these targets by 2050. Is that something that you're worried about?
No, I think it's definitely something that we can do. But yeah, I'll let the other panelists speak, but I think it's definitely achievable. It's just that the current approach needs to be a bit more bold.
Okay, Kate. Do you want to come back on that about actually achieving this by the target date? But equally, some of the barriers that you're finding when it comes to decarbonising the public sector buildings. What are the main ones that you're coming across?
Yeah, sure. I mean, picking up on your first point in terms of the target, yeah, I think we've got to, we can't say, like Naomi said, we can't say anything other than, yes, this is achievable, but it is, hugely challenging. And there's still this gap between words and actions, I think. Yeah. And Naomi mentioned just then the funding being there, but it actually only being a third of what is required in the public sector. So there's absolutely this gap between words and actions that needs to be closed, and it's not impossible, but there's a lot of work to be done for sure. And your other question there was around kind of what are the more general barriers to decarbonising our buildings. And I think it kind of comes down to three things, and we've really already kind of touched on the first main two, being finance and the supply chain. Obviously, there is a cost, a capital cost to all of these things. I think a deep retrofit of a home is going to cost you somewhere between kind of 30 and 50k. And if we look at the uplift from the standard practice that we're doing now in a new build, non-domestic building, that can be kind of 15 to 30% increase in the total capital cost at the moment. Obviously, there's fuel costs is a huge thing at the moment that actually is driving us in the right way in terms of those financial implications. But we've still got this kind of driver that there's a cost difference between gas and electricity, and electricity is the path towards net zero carbon away from fossil fuels, but it's significantly more expensive. So even if you're switching out your gas-fired boilers for really efficient heat pumps, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're spending less on your heating. So there's that to resolve. The solution there, of course, is economies of scale is going to improve that situation. If we look at photovoltaics, they've come down in price 80% over the last 10 years. So we just need to start scaling some of these solutions. We also mentioned the supply chain, and Moses kind of touched on this as well. To meet net zero targets, we need a very wide scale retrofit program. You know, we really are tinkering around the edges at the moment, but to meet net zero, we pretty much need to be retrofitting all of our buildings to be more energy efficient. And there's some of that knowledge and skills in the supply chain, but there's nowhere near enough to deliver this low carbon retrofit on the scale that we need. So, you know, builders that can retrofit to these high fabric standards or are trained to install heat pumps, for example. So I definitely kind of concur with what Moses said there. And I think there's one final piece as well, which is around the disruption factor. And I'd be so interested, Alex, to talk to you a bit later about your project as well, because obviously, especially when we're converting from fossil fuel heating systems to electric heating systems, like you mentioned, you've got a ground source heat pump in your project, Alex. There's a huge disruption factor to the residents and the building occupants there, in terms of you're not just swapping out a boiler for a heat pump, it's all the heat emitters in the building. You need to look at an insulation program to go along with that. So big disruption. I think it's probably easier in an office or a large public building, but a really hard sell for homeowners, I think, to understand the benefit and to put up with that disruption. So I think there's definitely some thought that needs to be put into that about the user experience and engagement with building users and homeowners. I feel like that sounded really negative, talking about all the barriers. They're certainly all
well, no, not in the slightest, to be honest. That is actually really insightful, Kate, but I think we should that you made to this project. And Alex, it would be interesting to know how the building users actually reacted to the project, both before and during, and indeed after the project. What was that like?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of worry about what it was going to be like to work within the building. So, you know, we were, was it going to be really hot or really cold? You know, depending on what month it was. You know, was it going to be really drafty because we were doing stuff with the glazing? We had you know, there was kit coming in and out all the time within the building. You know, there were a lot of concerns about noise as well. COVID did help us in that respect, that we had less people within the building. So we were able to move teams around so that they weren't close by, you know, and we phased work so that there was a limit to kind of what areas were disrupted at different times. So we did take some time to think about that. We also had a really kind of clear communication strategy internally for teams. So it's not just our organisation that works from our building. We have NHS teams that work there. We also have trading standards and other teams that work from our building. So there was a really clear comms strategy that went alongside the kind of capital project design work as well. So I did just want to pick up on something that Naomi said, because building management and controlling our building was something that we had lost control of, I guess. We had an old management system which wasn't fit for purpose. So that in itself is going to enable us to keep driving down our energy, keep improving our energy efficiency within the building. And I think, again, another take home from this is that this project is not in isolation. We have a programme of what we call Green to Our Core projects, where we look at becoming getting us to that net zero target. And I think, once you embark on a project of this nature, it has to be embedded into, your everyday operations, business as usual. So a lot of what we did in this project was making sure that our facilities teams were on board with the new tech that was going to be in the building. They've been involved from the start. So, and I'm not saying it's been absolutely smooth along that journey, because you're changing people's mindsets. It's new technology that you're putting into a building, new ways of managing the building. But I definitely think having that really strong project team, having people that will be managing the building involved from the start, you can't underestimate that. So,
and that is exactly what Moses was talking about, isn't it? And interestingly, we've had a question from our audience. This is from Bonnie. I think you may have answered some of it already, Alex, but it says, what was the process like to performs before improvements were proposed? Again, touching on what you said, Moses, about understanding how your building operates, this work is done. So what was that like for you, Alex? And also, we have Bonnie says that she's working on an existing NHS estate, finding it a challenge to collate the right energy data to understand where improvements can be effectively made. So I wonder if you would like to comment on that, and also you, Moses. I might come back to you for that as well, Naomi, if that's all right. So what sort of things need to be looked at specifically when you talk about understanding how your building performs before improvements are proposed?
Yeah, so we did. We had a kind of full condition survey in terms of that fabric of the building, and also the kind of M&E, the plant within the building, so we could understand what was nearing end of life, what could be made efficient so it could last a little bit longer, because we're also cognizant of the embodied energy in terms of the new stuff that we're putting in. I think the biggest thing for us was about choosing a partner, a delivery partner to do this work. So at the time, we used a local partnerships kind of procurement framework in order to procure an energy services partner. And that was really integral. So that having that relationship with a design and build team, in order to kind of make sure that we could put really good data into the modelling and into the business case. And like I said, it did take us quite a long time, because we were really wanting to get as close to net zero as possible with this quite big project that we're doing. And we're somewhere between 80 and 90%. So we're pleased. But contractor and having that relationship with someone in order to kind of investigate and taking the time to get the data. It's not always there straight away. So I think I would say definitely take some time to do that, and don't just kind of plow forward thinking, oh, well, it's okay with what we've got. I think it's very much make sure that you've got that right data and seasonal data and all of that kind of stuff as well. So
I saw Naomi nodding there, so I'm just wondering if you want to come in on that, Naomi, and just add anything.
Yeah, I'd very much emphasize everything that Alex says. It's really starting with the data first. It's really important to understand how the building is working before you start investing in things. So it might be that there's not enough metering data. Sub-metering might be really important. Understanding what different pieces of kit use. I mean, I've worked in sort of quite complicated buildings where they've been designed really well, but then the automated controls have been, they just haven't been set properly. So, for example, it's quite common to have very high-tech buildings where the sensor lights just have been, maybe a member of staff has defaulted so that they're not working. So actually they're being left on all night. So it's important to understand what existing controls are within the building and whether those are being used. And depending on the sizing, even quite basic things, whether the heating is coming on, are there actually any staff in the building when the heating is coming on? Is there, what's the correlation between the staff working hours and some of the services? So it's really worth spending. It's almost like, I suppose it's a little bit like a pyramid, and the thick bit at the bottom is the data and understanding that data and the story that it's telling. And that's how you can best see how to invest that money. I'd quite like to pick up on a point that was made earlier about retrofit, if that's okay.
Yeah.
About in terms of decarbonisation, about the sort of balance between heating and retrofitting. So quite a lot of the discussion so far has been on retrofitting, so making the building more thermally efficient and making the services more energy efficient within that building. But actually, the way that we get to net zero, the bulk of the work is about swapping out the fossil fuel heating. So just to put that emphasis back, because to some extent, the amount of insulation, etc., that you would need, it will be determined by your heat source and by the sort of economics of the heat source. So it's unlikely that we will need to deep retrofit a lot of our stock, providing that they can be efficiently heated by, say, heat pumps, for example. So there is a bit of a balance. So the level of retrofit and energy efficiency that we will need is likely to be less than in some sort of scenarios. So it's more achievable, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I was going to say that's sounds very good, actually. And on that, I know we're very quickly rapidly running out of time. Moses, I just want to ask on that optimistic note, do you think all buildings will meet energy efficiency targets?
I think all buildings can meet energy efficiency targets.
Okay.
It will need a lot of investment in materials and skills if we're going to meet those targets by 2030 or 35 or 40 or 50 even. I think an element of decarbonisation of the grid and heating will certainly be required if we're going to meet those targets, coupled with sensitive retrofit as appropriate to look after building fabric. But yes, I'll be positive to finish with and say yes, we can meet the targets if we're careful. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Kate, I'm going to leave the last word to you because we haven't heard from you actually for a couple of minutes, and it really is the how do you want to sort of end this really in terms of what would you like to add to any of what we've said today and certainly heard about?
All right, I'll go with 30 seconds. Do you know what? I believe the solutions are all there now. We're not waiting for somebody to invent some technology that doesn't exist. It's actually simple from a technical perspective when you get down to it. It's a combination of different solutions, but they all exist, and it's just about getting on and doing it. So definitely leaving on a positive note, I think.
Okay, well, we will leave it there. I know we've got some questions that came in that we haven't had time to answer, but we'll see if we can get those questions answered at a later point. But for now, I want to thank you all for joining me. Kate, Naomi, Moses and Alex, it's been a pleasure to talk to you all. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge. And we wish you all the best with what you're doing because it's for the benefit of all of us. So thank you very much. And thank you for sharing your information today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks now.
So we're going to end that discussion. Sadly, I know we could spend all day talking about it, but we will just leave it there. And thank you very much to our panel, our first panel indeed for today, kicking off the day with a great conversation. We are now going to take a break, and if you like, you can digest what's been covered so far. Also, if you have the chance, you can engage with the speed networking opportunity, and you never know, it may be an opportunity for you to chat to other people using what you've just heard as an icebreaker. Who knows? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the break. It was about 10 minutes, so we'll see you back here at 10 to 40. 10:40 rather. Thank you.